Hello and welcome to Comics Corner number 26. This is, as always, Michelle.
And this is Oren.
And we have a whole bunch of comics to cover today. First up, we will be reviewing the DC New 52 Week 1 titles that we didn't get to in the last podcast. And those are Green Arrow, Hawk and Dove, Men of War, O.M.A.C, and Static Shock. Then we will be acknowledging that there are other comics coming out besides DC Comics. And we'll be reviewing American Vampire Survival of the Fittest number 4, Daredevil number 3, Fear Itself number 6, Gladstone's School for World Conquerors number 5, Severed number 2, and Ultimate Spider-Man number 1. And then we will be jumping back into the world of DC Comics with our reviews of Week 2 comics, which are Batman and Robin, Batwoman, Deathstroke, Demon Knights, Frankenstein Agent of S.H.A.D.E, Green Lantern, and Grifter. Oh,
that's a lot of comics.
It took me 6 takes, but I finally got it right.
That's right. So those of you expecting a half-hour reviews of every comic, I'm afraid we're not going to be able to do that. And for those of you who heard that list going, my God, is this a 4-hour podcast? No, it isn't.
Don't worry, there'll be an intermission. We'll let you take a break.
That's right. And of course, you can make your own intermission anytime you want. Just hit the pause and do
the
whatever
marvels
you like.
Of technology.
Isn't it awesome?
It is.
So let's get to it. We've got Green Arrow coming up first. What did you think?
I actually took notes this time because
there's a lot of
I knew
comics.
I was going to be reading so many comics
Sure.
that I would end up mishmashing them all into in my head, and I would have like this weird comic where like Green Arrow went back into the Dark Ages and was fighting Batman, who was in fact a cyborg, and so I just decided I need to take notes. That said, my notes for Green Arrow were one line of just that I felt it was bland and uninteresting.
Yeah, I'd kind of agree. I really enjoy the Green Arrow character from the old days, and by old I mean Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams. I really liked how they did them. I really like how Kevin Smith did them in the last decade. I like the animated series version of Green Arrow. This kind of new, young, jet-setting kind of James Bond meets Robin Hood guy, it's bland.
Sure, I like the Green Arrow of old, also the kind of left-wing, crazy, liberal, hippie guy.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like, at least so far, we're really getting that sense of the character.
Yeah, we're not.
So, yeah, I know there was much kerfuffle on the internet about his facial hair being changed as part of kind of the small vilification of Green Arrow. And I don't know, I just wasn't inspired by it. I only vaguely remember the story at this point, and I just felt it was not very interesting, and didn't make me really care about the character or reading more about him. So.
Absolutely. We'll give it number 2, but that may be the end of it.
Hawk and Dove.
Hawk and Dove lost me right after they have the issue begins with this kerfuffle, to use your word.
It's a great word. I love kerfuffle.
On an airplane with sort of zombie monsters and things, and Dove is flying the plane, and they land, and the moment they lost me was right in that beginning part where Hawk lambasts Dove for being a bad driver. And I was like, wow, that's really cheesy. Okay. And it just went downhill from there.
And that is, I agree, that's kind of the like, wow, are we just gonna go for the most blatant stereotype we can of insulting the woman driver? Nice. So yeah, Hawk and Dove, written by Sterling Gates, art by Rob Liefeld. I was not looking forward to reading at all because I really am not a fan of Rob Liefeld's art. Though I will say that he has improved. He can draw feet now, which is something he couldn't do in the 90s. So I give the guy credit for his art skills have improved. I still don't like the fact that basically Hawk is always drawn with a constipation face, and Dove always has her orgasm face. And they don't really seem to change expression very much. Um, but I mean, the story was not. It was fine. It wasn't particularly interesting to me. I felt like it was trying too hard to be like hip and current and cool. You know, you've got zombies. Well, they're really big in pop culture right now, so let's put those in. We've got, and they're referred to as zombies. I mean, it's
Right.
not just a undead monster. I mean, they are specifically referred to as zombie monsters.
Right.
So okay, zombies are popular. Throw them in. We've got references to like internet and internet culture. Okay, put that in. You know, we've got characters talking in kind of the hipster slang, and it was just like, all right, this just feels like you're trying way too hard to make it appeal to the younger, hipper readers, and it just turned me off. So, I mean, I gave it a try. I'll read number 2, sort of unwillingly, but it really was not um, one that I enjoyed overly much. And I
Yeah.
just kind of think the characters, and I know you agree with me on this one. I just kind of think the idea of the avatar of war and the avatar of peace, and there having to be one. You know, there can't be one without the other. They both have to exist in order to have their powers, and I just think that's kind of a stupid
I do too.
and just very inelegant way of examining the duality of like good and evil and whatnot, and I just don't think it's that interesting of a concept to begin with. I only really like Hawk and Dove and Tiny Titans because they're adorable there.
Speaking of other things that weren't done elegantly, I think that of the books I've read, Hawk and Dove may have the absolute worst sort of continuity info dump of all of them, and that literally everything just stops for like the middle 2/3 of the book as Hawk talks to his dad
Well,
and Dove talks
and
to
I had
Boston
to love.
Brand about their
I
entire
mean,
history.
I think the characters talking about like remembering something that happened to them in the past can be an effective way of doing an info dump. But this one just made me laugh because at one point Hawk asks his dad like, "Do you remember a criminal named Dargo?" And Dad is like, "How could I forget him? He tried to kill me." And it's like, well, I don't know. It just seemed idiotic to me that you
Right.
would ask your dad, "Hey, you know that guy who tried to kill you? Do you
Right.
remember him? Because I know you
Exactly.
have a tendency to forget things like when people try to kill you."
Sure.
So to me, it
It's just
just made me
badly
laugh
done.
and shake my head. So anyway, Hawk and Dove was kind of a miss as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. Let's see what's up next. Men of War.
So I have to say that war comics aren't really my favorite. This is a two-story comic. The first sort of is about the character who will be in the new DCU Sergeant Rock,
Yeah,
and
it's
about
it's kind of the origin of how he becomes
and the second
Sergeant
story
Rock, and
is
it is written by Ivan Brandon, art by Tom Derenick.
and I like that one more than the second one. I think the coloring, especially, colorists don't get enough credit sometimes, and I think the coloring was really moody.
It
And
was moody, but I will say that at times I felt like it was a little bit too muddy and dark.
Okay.
Like, just I understand, obviously, it's war, and war is dirty, and war is dark, and you don't expect Technicolor Dreamland when you're dealing with a war comic, and that's fine. But I, when I was reading it, there were some panels where it was just a little bit difficult to kind of figure out what was going on and what the main focus was because it was just so dark and just I think they could have added just a little bit more color beyond kind of the sepia tone effect that they have.
Yeah, and I think the second
The
story.
art as a whole, though, I thought was good.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought the second one about kind of Navy SEALs, more or less in a sort of fictionalized Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever. I mean, it was obvious. It was going for the kind of obvious cliches, and it wasn't quite as good.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the first story, the Sergeant Rock story, was pretty good. I mean, I also war comics just is not a genre I really enjoy. It's just not my favorite genre as far as war stories. I don't even really like war movies, any of that. It's kind of like eh. But and I don't really know anything about the Sergeant Rock character at all. And so I thought this was an interesting story and gave a good introduction to the character and who he is and who he's going to become. And so in that regard, I thought it was effective and well written. I mean, it was interesting enough for me to keep reading it, which is someone who doesn't like war, the war genre, is I think a positive.
Yeah.
So it was, I'll read it. I'll read the second one, and it it may not be one that I keep on my pull list just because, like I said, just war comics in general are not my favorite thing to read. But I think it's well written and the art is good, and that if you like war stories, war fiction, I guess you'd probably enjoy it, and it's worth picking up.
Sure, and all of these sort of anthology books kind of rise and fall with the specific short stories in them. So hopefully, Sergeant Rock is going to be a regular. I mean, they're kind of setting him up to be a regular.
I believe that's the plan. Is that it's Sergeant Rock is always going to be the main story, and then there will be short story backup stories. And I will say that I do appreciate that DC with this relaunch is trying to expand their offerings. They're bringing back the war comics. We've got All Star Western, which is coming out in the later in the month. They've got I appreciate that they're trying to do more than just caped superhero stories.
I agree,
and I do support that.
And especially because it's also, I think, the way that a lot of new writers and new artists get in the door, and I think that's a great way to kind of keep the industry more vibrant as well. So, I think next we've got O.M.A.C.
O.M.A.C, yeah. So this one I really had no idea what to expect. I just was kind of suspicious of Dan DiDio writing a book. I was like, I don't really know
co-plotting, but he's not
as a writer. But anyway, yeah, it's Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen co-writing, Scott Koblish doing the art, and I really knew nothing about the character besides that he's a Kirby created character.
Yep,
and
that's where I was too.
Has a pretty fantastic blue mohawk.
And what else do you need, really, besides a blue mohawk? I
will say that this story was surprising to me in how much I enjoyed it. It's just crazy, over-the-top, action-packed fun from start to finish. There's not really deep morals or anything like that, but it's just O.M.A.C. smashing crap up. I almost said a different word, but I'm trying really hard to keep this. I'm trying so hard to keep our all ages label, and it's not easy sometimes. But it was just fun. I really enjoyed that the way the artist. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Scott Koblish did the inking, story and art by Keith Giffen and Dan DiDio. So sorry about that. I really enjoyed how they had a very Kirby-esque feel.
Yeah, I agree.
To the art.
An homage without being derivative.
Yeah, I mean, they had the Kirby dots and everything. Yep. And so it felt very much like you said, like an homage to Kirby. And it was just fun. I mean, O.M.A.C. just, is smashing things right and left, and it's just a crazy roller coaster ride that was lots of fun.
Yeah, and I will say that, like you, this is one I knew nothing about. I wasn't particularly excited about reading, and yet after I read it, and the ending is amusing as well as a reveal, and I was just like, you know what? I'm actually looking forward to number 2.
It was really fun, and it was it was refreshing to just have a fun romp of a book.
Sure.
I think a lot of the new 52 books have been very dark. I mean, obviously we have the DC dark line, and I've been really enjoying them because I do enjoy horror and the darker, more like Vertigo type stuff. So I certainly am not complaining about that. I think that stuff is awesome. But on the other hand, it's fun to just have a crazy romp that's just fun and amusing and exciting.
Absolutely. So I think Static Shock is the last of the first week that we didn't cover last time.
Static Shock, Scott McDaniel and John Rossum though now no longer.
Right, John Rosum's leaving. I think
In
he's done up to 3 or whatever, and then he's gone.
yeah, in what was quite surprising, quite a surprising announcement, John Rosum is leaving the book. Pencils by Jonathan Glapion and Lebo Underwood. So yeah, Static Shock. I guess it's been, I don't really know a lot about the character. I know he's a milestone character that were licensed by
I think
DC,
that's Dwayne McDuffie's.
And he was Dwayne McDuffie's character. And it's been a long road in bringing him to having his own book.
Right.
And he had a previous one that was canceled. And so it's been kind of a rough road for this character. And now it seems like it's continuing with John Rosum leaving the book. But so this was a character I really hadn't read any of his previous previous stuff. And I enjoyed the character. I liked the character of Static. I thought he was a fun and interesting, he's a high school kid, and I thought he was an interesting character, and I thought he was very well written, kind of with that cockiness that is, but very intelligent, and he's a young guy. He feels like he can do anything, and sometimes he's wrong. I just didn't think that the story was as interesting. That the menace and the villains and the mystery that they're trying to create just didn't grab me as much. So I enjoyed the character of Static, but not so much the world that he was placed into.
Yeah, that was my thought. That I thought the writer did a very good job of fleshing out Static, his sort of family life and his hero life and his job and everything else, but then sort of the plot of the issue really wasn't as gripping as the character sort of deserved, if you will.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so there is life other than the New 52.
That's right, moving out of the DC universe.
Well, out of the DCU, but still with DC, the company.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because this is Vertigo.
So yeah, American Vampire Survival of the Fittest #4. I think it's 4 of 5.
Yeah, 4 of 5.
So I was trying to pull it up. I'm trying to stall while I pull up the book.
Well, I'll give my impression of it while you're doing so.
Oh, briefly, I guess we should say, written by Scott Snyder, art by Sean Murphy. What did you think?
I really liked it. Again, I talked earlier about how Hawk and Dove was a really kind of shoddy way to do so much sort of info dump backstory. I think American Vampire Survival of the Fittest #4 was a great example of how you do a lot of info dumping right. There was a lot of explanation about how one of the characters, a doctor that they've come to find, how he sort of found himself embroiled in this whole mess. And yet it never felt dull. It never felt like everybody stops now as he sits down and says, well, gather round, children, and I have a story to tell you. And of course, then the actual sort of in-the-moment adventure of how they're going to get out of this castle filled with Nazi vampires was quite interesting in and of itself. And I felt it was very gripping.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really enjoying both the main American Vampire series and also this miniseries. And I think, once again, I think Sean Murphy's art is beautiful and really fits the mood of the story. I agree with you that the backstory history was written very well and told very well and in a very interesting way. I do have to comment that I always think it's funny that in stories a lot of times this will happen, where, they're hiding in these, catacombs underneath the castle, having been pursued by the Nazi vampires who are trying to kill them, and that's a good time for storytelling hour.
Sure.
It's kind of like, is that really when you would decide to stop and be like, sit down, my children, and let me tell you a tale of my past and how we got to this point. It's like, maybe...
Well, they have to let the Nazis catch up so that they can catch them.
Maybe now is a good time to run and tell the story later. That said, I think, it's a great. It was a great chapter in the story. I really enjoy, one of the things that I really enjoy about American Vampire is the way Scott Snyder has created this very complex mythology of the vampires. That it's not just the standard European vampires that we know of from popular culture.
Absolutely.
He's created this whole
hierarchy family tree
of different species of vampires, and this like eugenics war being waged by the European vampires against these other types of vampires who are being killed and wiped out, and it's just such an interesting and well thought out mythology that he's created that just adds another layer to the story. I mean, it's not just the story of humans fighting vampires. It's the story of the vampires themselves and their history and mythology, and I think it's just so well realized and very fascinating. So yeah, it's a great story. American Vampires is a great series. I definitely look forward to the
stunning conclusion
in this miniseries, and you can't go wrong with Nazi vampires, really. So yeah, it's good.
All right, so the next one is one I just read, so I'm going to just go through that quickly. Daredevil. Speaking of Jack Kirby, there's a wonderful Jack Kirby
love the cover. Yeah, it's a very, very much a Jack Kirby pastiche. I don't know who did the cover, but
I can tell you in a moment. The cover was done, it doesn't say, so I'm guessing it's just done by the people who did the comic.
Yeah, who's the artist?
The penciler is Paulo Rivera, and the inker is Joe Rivera.
All right.
And it's written by Mark Waid. So I've been really enjoying Daredevil, and this is no exception. I think that this is an old villain from the run, and so there's a couple like sort of backstory history panels in there where they talk about this guy meeting up with others, and very much done in the old uniforms, the old Kirby style. You know, there's an image of Fantastic Four and everything in the old uniform, and Thor in the old uniform, done very well, and it was a lot of fun. It was a quick, fun little issue, and I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm really enjoying Mark Waid's new run on Daredevil. I'm glad they brought it back.
Cool. Sounds good. So up next in our galloping through comics podcast is Gladstone School of World Conquerors, which I've just been enjoying so much. It's such a good little book,
and it's a great like young adult book. It really is.
By Mark Andrew Smith.
Not even adult, just young person book.
Way to talk over me while I'm saying who created this book.
Anyway, apologies to you and to the creators.
By Mark Andrew Smith and Armand Villavert, and it's just a lot of fun. This issue sees our young villains in the previous issue discovered comic books for the first time, and it was a fantastic like meta commentary on comic books, and that continued to a degree in this one, which this time now they've read the comic books and they're very distressed to realize that their parents, the supervillains, are defeated in every single comic book, and they're just mad that wouldn't happen. Our parents wouldn't do this stupid stuff. They wouldn't always be beaten by the heroes, like, and they're mad, and so they decide to respond and try and right the wrong that they see of being done against their parents. And it's really cute. It's a lot of fun. The art is just very colorful and vivacious and great. And it's just fun to see the reaction from the other side of how, how not only the supervillains feel about being trounced every time and why that happens, because there's a little of a deeper mystery to it. But also to think, hey, some of those supervillains might have kids, and how do their kids feel about seeing their parents be defeated time and time again?
Absolutely.
And so it's just a lot of fun. Like you said, I appreciate that it is it is a book that is accessible to young and old alike. It is a great kids book, as well as just being a lot of fun for adults, and it's great, and I definitely recommend anyone who's not reading it to check it out, because it's a lot of fun.
So we actually screwed up with our alphabetical order for a second. So we're going to go from G back to F, and we're going to cover Fear Itself, Book 6.
Oh, we totally did. I just skipped right over Fear Itself, didn't I?
You did, but that's fine.
It's because apparently I never learned my ABCs.
That's all right. It's fine. So, Fear Itself, Matt Fraction, Stuart, Imon, and Art. We are on the 6th part of the 7-part Marvel event, crossover event. So what do you think about this installment?
It's ramping up to its conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The stakes are raised. The pieces are being set.
Mm-hmm.
The battle is beginning. So it was interesting. I look forward to seeing how it ends, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it wasn't.
Obviously, you can't be that incredibly moved by it.
No, I just felt like, okay, when I read it, I just felt like, okay, well, that happened. So, it felt like setting up for the final battle. And, that's what it did. And it did it well. It just didn't feel to me like there was anything amazing or stunning about this particular issue. It just felt like putting all the pieces in play for the big final battle to end all battles.
Pretty much. I think that Matt Fraction did get a lot of sort of, fist in the air, frack yeah moments where, everybody gets to say more or less, I will die to win this type of thing, gets to show how heroic they are. So it basically set up. You've got your evil guys who are like, I'm going to take over the world because I can, and then you've got the good people who are like, I'm going to go down fighting. So and we'll watch it happen in the next one.
Yep.
All right.
The one where they all die and everything ends.
Exactly.
The world is destroyed.
So getting back on the alphabetical
that's not
track.
How it's going to happen?
It might be. You never know. It is Matt Fraction after all. So getting back on the alphabetical track, we have Severed number 2.
Yep, by Scott Snyder and Scott Tuft.
Art by?
I thought it was art and cover by Attila Futaki.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying Severed a lot. I think it's definitely kind of a slow build psychological horror story.
Yep.
There's not big obvious monsters jumping out from every corner. It's much more of a things in the shadows and lurking around just outside of your peripheral vision. But I think sometimes that's scarier. The idea that there are monsters among us in the form of bad men and nasty things happening, and Chicago, which is where
they are now,
it takes place, is very much a city that this takes place in 1916, and I know history. Chicago was kind of known as the city where people could just disappear. And you really get that sense. I think the Scott Snyder and Scott Tuft, did their research.
Oh yeah, a lot of research.
Really do a great job of bringing the time period to life, and just the attitudes and feelings of the time really leap off the page and really the time period is in of itself a character in the story. The story relies very heavily on its setting and its time and the attitudes that were prevalent of that time, and it's really good. It's very interesting and well written, we're starting to care about the main character and don't want anything bad to happen to him, but yet there's just this creeping dread that something horrible is going to happen to him.
Well, we know something happens
And,
to him because we see him in number 1 with like an arm missing or whatever.
And the whole story is how that happened. So we know that something bad is going to happen. There's that feeling of dread, but we're so, he's, I think, being written so well that it's like you want to just be like, stop, no, wait, don't go there, oh no, and it's very good.
Yeah, I agree. Scott Snyder has a real way with sort of creating full pictures, and this is a slower comic, but each issue seems to be bringing more depth to the world.
And I do, in general, think the art is really lovely and really depicts the time period very well. I felt like this issue, some of the color and stuff was just a little bit too dark in the sense that, I mean, I understand, obviously, it's supposed to be dark because there is supposed to be this idea of shadows and darkness lurking around the corner. But there were times when it was very difficult for me to actually tell what was happening. But it was great.
And speaking of comics that are starting a slow run, we have Ultimate Comics Spider-Man number 1.
Yep.
The new Miles Morales.
Yes, so written by Brian Michael Bendis, art by Sarah Pichelli. Obviously, this was one of those comics that made it into the mainstream news when there was a bit of an uproar when it was revealed that the new Spider-Man was a young half black, half Hispanic, I think, boy, Miles Morales, and unfortunately we saw some
ugliness,
nastiness, and racism rear its head. But I really enjoyed the first issue. I really like Miles Morales. He seems like a cool kid.
He does.
And I think he was very well written, and I'm excited to see how he, evolves into Spider-Man.
Absolutely. Brian Bendis has decided that he is going to take his sweet time and introduce Miles in a nice, slow way. And I remember in the olden days, you'd have sort of the entire origin in one issue. So from Peter Parker being a nerdy kid to the last page, he's running around to Spider-Man. And this one, it's a slow, we're meeting him, we're meeting his family, we're meeting his sort of educational situation. We've learned about why he would be in contact with his spider and everything. And it's laid out very well. You care about the characters. The pacing is really good because it's slow, but it never feels like it's dragging. And I really enjoyed it. I'm very excited about this one, actually. So.
Yeah, I agree.
So now I think we're back to the New 52.
Yes, so now we read 7.
Yep, we read the first 7 from September 14th.
Of last Wednesday's New 52 releases. We will review the other 6 next week's podcast.
That's right, and
because there are just only so many hours in a day.
Exactly.
So up first, I will try to actually do real alphabetical order this time.
Our listeners are awesome, and they all forgive you
for being an idiot
from
time to time.
You're not an idiot.
Okay, so up first, Batman and Robin by somebody.
By Peter Tomasi.
Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason.
Yes.
So yeah, this is Batman and
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne as Batman
with his son.
Damian as Robin. And wow, they have some relationship issues, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that Damian's kind of a dick doesn't help either.
Well, to be fair, Bruce is kind of a dick too.
He is. Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. They're both two jerks trying to get on with each other.
They clearly have some trust issues. I would probably quite strongly recommend that they have some family therapy to work through their relationship problems. But clearly, that's not going to happen. So I enjoyed the art. I thought the art was really good. very evocative and had great movement and was very dynamic. I enjoyed some of the relationship between Batman and Robin.
Right.
I'm really not that up on a lot of what's happened in the Batman continuity of late.
Right.
I kind of got overwhelmed and confused by all of the Batman Inc. and
Right.
all the stuff
And it
that was
starts
happening.
out with references to Batman
And
Inc.
yeah, and so I'm not really that familiar with Damian as a character or as Robin. So this was more or less my first introduction to him as Robin. With, to be honest, my big familiarity of Batman coming from the animated series. So it was kind of fun to have a Batman Robin dynamic where they don't really get along, and Robin doesn't really seem to always give a flying fig about what Batman is asking him or telling him to do. But so it was interesting. There were some fun little moments. I enjoyed Alfred's little. He had a fun quip about Damian is trying to dig at Bruce and saying, you're so focused on your parents' death and you've got are dusty photographs and whatnot. And Alfred has a little quip of I disagree. There is not a speck of dust on those pictures. I dust them every day. And I just thought it was a fun little moment. But it was fine. It wasn't the greatest thing I read, but
Yeah,
it
again,
wasn't.
I thought the plot, just the villain, whatever, wasn't all that gripping. I also want to add, you mentioned already that you were having a little bit of trouble maybe following because you're not up on Batman continuity. And, it is sort of weird that with this new 52, some characters have abridged continuity, some, like Superman, have obviously been altered, and some haven't changed at all, such as Batman and Green Lantern. And you do have to know continuity for this one. For example, I specifically remember there's one quote where Damian says, and I believe these are the exact words, I'm not looking at the panel, but he's talking about how Batman doesn't trust him. And he says, even Dick trusted me. And previously all that had been mentioned is there was a Robin named Dick. So he doesn't mention the fact that there was a Batman named Dick, that it was the same guy who was Robin. I mean, all of that isn't even mentioned. It's just you had to know that when he said even Dick trusted me, he happened to be talking about the same Dick who was Robin, who became a Batman, and blah, 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 blah. And if you didn't, it was just a sentence that made no sense.
Yeah.
So I think that the whole continuity thing, it's just not being handled. In some issues, it's being handled incredibly well in some of these lines. In others, I don't think they did the best job, and this is one of them.
I do think, while on the one hand, I have been very pleased with the quality of a lot of the books that I've read from the first 2 weeks of the relaunch. I think there's been a lot of really great books, and I am very pleased and excited by that. But I do think DC didn't quite go as all in as they should have. I think they maybe, I don't know if they were afraid to commit as totally as it sounded like they were originally going to, or I don't know exactly what all the behind the scenes stuff was, but it just feels like they missed an opportunity to really go all in, to do a clean reboot, to really make it just a fresh start. And now, unfortunately, you've got the weird continuity issues of not just within individual books, but trying to look at the new DCU as a whole and being like, well, where does this fit in with Justice League, and how does that fit in with this character's relationship here? And I think it has gotten quite confusing. Now, on the one hand, I think new readers probably aren't going to be quite as hung up and worried about, well, in the Justice League, the characters are doing this and interacting this way, but then in Action Comics or Batman or whatever, Detective Comics, they're doing this, and how does this fit in, and how does it go all together? I mean, I think a lot of new readers will just kind of read and enjoy, hopefully. But and that's honestly, that's the approach I try to take, because otherwise I think it does get just frustrating and maddening and confusing, as I just kind of try and read each book as happening in their own little bubble universe,
Right.
and not worry about, well, wait, how does that tie into what's happening here, and how does that work with this character's interactions in this book, because it just falls apart at that point. And it's too bad. It would have been cool if they'd done a full on reboot where we wouldn't have these problems.
That is true.
And speaking of a book which picked up right where the last one ended, and has had absolutely no change in continuity from the reboot, is Batwoman #1 by J.H. Williams III. I think writing and doing art.
You're
correct?
Right. Written and art, and I think the other guy co-wrote.
Yeah, W. Hayden Blackman co-written or co-writer. And this is one of the ones that I was looking forward to the most, just because I enjoyed Batwoman so very much.
Right.
With when Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams III were doing it, and so I'd been looking forward to this one, and it's great. It's beautiful.
It is. It's gorgeous. I think, absolutely
to no
gorgeous.
one's surprise, because J.H. Williams is just such a phenomenal artist, and just manages to just give such beauty and energy and creepiness all tied up in one lovely package. And it doesn't hurt that Dave Stewart is doing the color.
Very true.
Because he is arguably
the
best colorist out there right now. And yeah, the story's great. I really enjoyed the use of the folkloric character La Llorona. I had a good friend in school who she was from, I believe her family was from Colombia. But she would talk about that was the story that her mom would tell to them when they were kids. If they were crying or like didn't want to go to bed at night or were making too much noise, mom would tell them about La Llorona, who would come and prey on noisy crying children. So it was
a creepy one, that's for sure.
Yeah, she's a very creepy character, and has always been one of my favorite characters from folklore. So it's cool to see her being utilized in a very creepy way and to great effect. So I very much enjoyed it. It was a great story. I don't necessarily know if it's a good jumping on point for new readers, because I feel like if you hadn't read the previous Batwoman stories, you may not have the fullest appreciation for what's happening and who this character is and why this stuff matters. But I felt that it was great and beautiful to look at and very enjoyable to read.
Yeah, I think that it's certainly one that is compelling. I think that perhaps it's so compelling that if you're a new reader, even if you're confused a little bit, that you'd stick with it just because everything else was so good.
And hopefully be inspired to seek out the trade paperback of the previous run, because it's fantastic.
Absolutely. So moving on, we have one of the more interestingly named comics, Deathstroke.
So Deathstroke is a badass. That's what the comic went to great length to convince me of. Are
you convinced?
Sure, he's badass.
He's badass.
Do I care? Nope.
Don't care at all.
The problem...
So who wrote it and who did the art?
That's a great question. Hang on. Let me tell you once I get it. This is where you stall.
So, yeah, I mean, the comic itself, the story I found completely ungripping in more or less every possible way. I was never that intrigued by who Deathstroke was, who his compatriots were, what mission they were trying to accomplish. At no point did it grip me.
So Deathstroke, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Joe Bennett. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, he's our dog has something to say about the title as well.
That's right. She apparently did not like Deathstroke either.
Anyway, he's an assassin for hire. So as you might expect, it's violent and bloody. And he's, like I said, the comic goes to great lengths to convince us that he's a badass. But the problem to me with these, with anti-heroes, is that sure he's an assassin, he's a killer, but in order for me to care about him, he can be a bad guy, or in order for me to care about reading, a story about him, he may be a bad guy, but there needs to be something to his character that I find interesting,
right? The way
empathetic,
in, as they say.
There has to be something that I can identify with. I mean, like last night we watched the Thor movie again. We just got it on Blu-ray, and I think one of the things I loved so much about Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki was that, well, on the one hand, Loki is the quote-unquote bad guy in the movie. He just portrayed him so sympathetically that even though you were like, oh man, he's
doing nasty
bad
stuff.
like he's nasty, you felt for him, like you were like, but I get why he's doing it, and it's heartbreaking. I did not feel like there was any redeeming or interesting or worthwhile aspect to the character of Deathstroke at all. So I was kind of like, I mean, the characters that I thought were most interesting, he kills off.
Right.
So it was just like, okay, I don't really care about you.
Yeah,
You're just a thug, right, as portrayed here. So.
Yeah. So goes Deathstroke.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Demon Knights.
Demon Knights.
By Paul Cornell. Art by oh god, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Diogenes Neves. Neves.
Could be
something to that effect. I'm really sorry. I got that one wrong.
So this was one that we had absolutely no interest in at all when it was announced. However, after hearing Paul Cornell at Comic-Con talking about it, he got us pretty damned enthused about it.
Yes, and the art is beautiful.
It is. It's excellent art.
Absolutely gorgeous. And this one was a lot of fun. I really liked Demon Knights a lot. I mean, it's one of my just big interests outside of comics is history, and particularly, medieval English history, and that is exactly the setting of medieval European history, and that is exactly the setting of Demon Knights. And we've got Etrigan, who is always fun, and Madame Xanadu and Vandal Savage, as well as some new characters that Paul Cornell created. And I thought it was just a really fun, exciting tale. I like I said, the art is absolutely spectacular. It's really beautiful, and I really enjoyed it.
So did I, and I think that Paul, the dialogue is snappy and fun.
Yes.
I think that
it made me chuckle a few times. There was some great humor.
Yeah, and I think he does a great job of also tying in his medieval story to the future DCU. We can already see the underpinnings of how characters
we already know
will
that
join.
Stormwatch evolves from Demon Knights. I also will give Demon Knights my award for probably the greatest line of the comics that I read this week, which was towards the end. There's the fantastic line of we find the source of the problem and we throw dragons at it.
That's how you solve everything, really.
I think that's generally just a good philosophy to live by.
Absolutely.
So I very much enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to issue number 2.
Absolutely. So this was so Demon Knights is definitely a winner and not one that we were initially excited about, but after reading it, it's absolutely worth it. So moving on to Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E.
Yep. Written by Jeff Lemire, art by Alberto Ponticelli, which I also really enjoyed. I'm a big fan of Jeff Lemire's writing. I also thought the art was very good, and this is one that I was highly skeptical about because I was like, Frankenstein as a hero agent, like that seems kind of kind of weird, but all right, I'll give it a try. And I thought this had some really, really fun moments. I very much enjoyed that Father Time is now a sassy little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was just a fun twist. I enjoyed the sci-fi, supernaturally tech. The teeny, the ant farm,
By
the
Ray,
miniaturized.
Dr. Ray Palmer,
Uh-huh.
who I don't know if in this DCU, but used to be
was
the Atom.
And so yeah, I thought Jeff Lemire even got to work in some nice commentary through Frankenstein on the dangers of man playing God and what can go wrong and why that's not a good idea, and kind of a cautionary tale on science gone too far, which was interesting. I know you mentioned that there's been some criticism online of this being
Hellboy
a bit of
for the DCU.
Yeah, being a rip on Hellboy, which I can see that. Definitely with the S.H.A.D.E agency kind of
being the BPRD.
And Frankenstein being a little Hellboy-esque. I can
and he's
see,
got a gun that looks like Hellboy's gun.
I do think that it feels like it's going to diverge and be its own thing, and that while yes, the intro setup does feel very Hellboy-esque, I feel like it is going to go its own way and create its own unique identity and story, and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was really interesting and entertaining, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. I mean, I think I was a little more because I've read more Hellboy than you. I've been reading all of our Hellboy library, so I think the Hellboyness was a bit more consuming to me. But if it goes in a different direction, I think it definitely has potential.
So next, Green Lantern.
Talk about another one that had zero continuity change.
Jeff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. My note for Green Lantern was okay, not great. Clearly, I had lots of deep philosophical things to say about it.
But I think that's kind of all there really is to say about it.
This
in a way.
one, I think, more so than any of the other New 52 books I've read so far. This one, to me, did not feel like Green Lantern #1. It felt like Green Lantern whatever number Green Lantern was at before they renumbered it. Like
Absolutely.
It just felt like the next installment of Green Lantern. Sinestro is back in the Corps. Hal Jordan is having problems adjusting to life, not as a Green Lantern anymore.
Yep.
But if you've not been following the Green Lantern story, really don't know why Hal Jordan's not a Green Lantern anymore.
Right.
We don't really know why it's a big deal that Sinestro is back in the Corps. And so to me, this really just felt like, it wasn't a bad comic, it wasn't a bad story, but it just didn't feel like a relaunch. It felt like Green Lantern, like I said, number 68 or whatever Green Lantern was at. I think it was something around there previously.
And if you are reading Justice League, there's wait a minute, but Hal Jordan is the Green Lantern, but that was 5 years ago, and he had the ring, but now he doesn't. So wait a minute, which is when, and when did this happen, and how did this, and what's going on?
It's very confusing.
Yeah, so Green Lantern, we'll give it #2, but I can't say that I'm really inspired by this one. And speaking of ones that, boy, did they not inspire me, let's talk for the last comic of this episode, let's talk about Grifter.
Yeah, so Grifter, written by Nathan Edmondson, art by Cafu, is a character that I was not familiar with really at all.
No, I think it's a Wildstorm character.
I think so. I was not familiar with him in any way, shape, or form prior to this, and I wasn't really inspired in finding out more.
No.
I kind of read it and went, okay.
Yeah.
That's who he is, and it didn't really interest me to wonder about him or who he is or following his story. I just felt
Yeah.
like it just fell flat.
It did, totally. Completely flat. I didn't care what the character was going through. I never got any kind of a feeling for what his personality was like, only what he was doing. We know what his actions are as he's making them, but we don't know what he's like as a person, and I can't say that I was inspired enough to want to know.
Yeah, I agree. So look at that. We did it. We made it through 18 comics in less than an hour. Man, I feel tired.
We did, and I would just sum up by saying that I think the losers so far have been Green Arrow, Hawk and Dove, Deathstroke, and Grifter. But overall, like you had already said, I think the new 52 really are showing a level of quality and creativity that has been really nice to see.
Yeah, and I think my top 2 picks for the September 14th new 52 titles, if you're only going to read 2, would be Batwoman and Demon Knights. They're
Absolutely, and we'll see what the other 6 we haven't read will
that's
be
why I
next
said
week.
of the 7 that we read.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the end, when this is all done, when all the number 1s have come out, we will do our wrap up and top 10 and which ones, trying to kind of our pull list, so to speak, after reading all of them, but that's still a few weeks down the line.
Absolutely. So, as ever, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a comment on our website, comiccornerpodcast.com, on iTunes, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook.
That's right. We love the positive reviews on iTunes. I get very excited when I see a new review. It makes my day.
And thank you for those of you who are leaving comments on the website.
Yep.
There's, I think, one comment I haven't gotten to yet because it's been a pretty busy week, and we've been trying to read 18 comics. But I will, I promise.
And we always love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your picks for the DC New 52 books that have come out so far, which ones you've read, which you're enjoying, which you're hating. And, definitely drop us a line. And until next week...
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.